I only learned about my husband's double life when his son from another marriage showed up on our doorstep asking for his dad. It was a Tuesday afternoon, about 3 o'clock, the kind of mundane, forgettable hour that usually involves me grading papers or thinking about what to make for dinner. My husband, Robert, was upstairs, taking a conference call in his home office. Our life was defined by this kind of predictable peace. We had been together for 12 years, married for 9. We had 2 kids, aged 6 and 8, and we lived the textbook definition of a quiet, stable, upper middle class life. Robert was my rock. He was meticulous, honest, almost painfully conventional, or so I believed. The doorbell rang. It was insistent, sharp, not the gentle chime of a neighbor. When I opened the door, a boy was standing there, maybe 16 or 17, dressed in clothes that were slightly too big for him, holding a worn backpack. He had the familiar thick, dark hair that ran in Robert's family and the exact same serious set to his jaw that I kissed goodnight on my own son. The resemblance was immediate and suffocating. My breath caught in my throat. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The boy looked past me, his eyes wide open with combination of fear and desperation. Is is Robert here? Robert Sullivan? My husband's name. Robert Sullivan. Yes, I managed. Who are you? The boy swallowed hard, shifting his weight. He looked down at his shoes, then back up at me with the resignation that broke my heart even though I didn't know why yet. My name is Caleb. He's my dad. The world stopped. It didn't spin or blur, it just stopped, silent and frozen around that impossible sentence. I stepped back, my hand instinctively going to my chest where a sharp, cold pain had just erupted. 1,000 questions screamed in my head, but only one weak, pointless observation came out. That's impossible. Robert has 2 children. Ours. Caleb just shook his head. No, ma'am. He has me too. My mom is Janice. He hasn't seen me in 5 years, but I needed him. I left Caleb standing on the doorstep and slowly walked to the bottom of the stairs, calling up to the office. Robert, get down here. Now. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a low, lethal edge he had never heard before. Robert descended the stairs, phone still in hand, annoyance clear on his face, until he saw Caleb. The blood drained out of Robert's face so completely that he looked like a statue carved from ice. He didn't speak, he didn't deny it. He just stared at the boy who was an undeniable mirror image of himself. That non-denial confirmed everything. My entire 12 years with him were based on a lie so vast it had its own human consequence standing on my porch. I didn't let them speak. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed my keys, and simply said, "I'm taking the children to my sister's house. You two stay here. When I return, you will have the entire truth ready for me." I didn't want my children, his children, to see the implosion. I drove to my sister's house, not crying, but feeling utterly detached, like a character in a movie watching the final, tragic scene unfold. When I finally returned, it was dark. I found Robert and Caleb sitting in the living room in a silence so thick it felt weighted. Caleb was sleeping on the sofa, exhausted. Robert was sitting across from him, hat in his hands. I didn't look at Caleb. My focus was only on the man who had stolen my life. The truth, Robert. Start at the beginning and don't skip a single year. He confessed everything over the next 3 hours. The story was a masterpiece of deceit. Robert had been married to Janice when I met him. He had told me he was divorced, that his first marriage ended cleanly 5 years before we met. That was his first lie. In reality, he was separated, but never divorced. Caleb was born 3 years before I even met Robert. He was living a miserable, failing marriage in another state, and he used a business trip to reinvent himself, creating the persona of the Daniel Sullivan, the quiet financial planner with a clean slate. He fell in love with me, divorced Janice quietly, years after he should have, and promised himself he would cut Caleb and Janice out entirely, believing the past could be sealed shut. He supported Caleb financially, secretly, but otherwise wiped his first family from his memory. He said he did it because he loved me, because I represented the fresh start he desperately needed. I needed you to believe I was a good man, Sarah, he pleaded. I didn't want you to see the failure I was before. I looked at him, feeling no compassion, only cold, searing pity. You didn't need me to think you were good, Robert. You needed me to build a fortress around your escape, and you used my love as the mortar. The devastating kicker came last. Caleb's mother, Janice, had died suddenly 3 weeks ago in a car accident. Caleb had nobody left. He had found Robert's address in his mother's old papers and, desperate and alone, had traveled 300 miles to find the only parent he had left. My husband was not just a liar, he was a newly responsible widower and father to a grieving child he had abandoned. The problem was no longer just a betrayal. It was a grieving child. I looked at Caleb, sleeping soundly on my sofa, looking so much like my own son, and I knew I couldn't send him back into the world alone, even if his existence was the atomic bomb that destroyed my marriage. I told Robert, "You have a son, Robert. Your life is over, but his life is just starting. He stays here. We will finalize our divorce after we find him a good lawyer and help him grieve. I will not raise my children next to a man who abandons his firstborn, but I will not abandon this boy either." The following days were a study in silent emotional pain. Robert moved into the guest room, and Caleb moved into the empty office, slowly unpacking the contents of his worn backpack. The divorce papers were filed within the week. My lawyer was shocked by the complexity and the absolute proof of fraud. But Robert offered no resistance. He knew he had lost everything the moment Caleb rang the bell. He paid for my lawyer, my future stability, and Caleb's entire future, including his college fund. He was trying to atone for a decade of moral bankruptcy. The final, agonizing piece was explaining Caleb to our daughters. We told them their father had an older son who needed a place to stay because his mother had died. We kept the details of the lie simple. Dad and Caleb's mom had a life before we did, and sometimes adult histories are complicated. Our 6-year-old was thrilled to have a cool older brother. Our 8-year-old was confused but protective. Caleb was quiet, withdrawn, but grateful. He found solace in my stability, the very stability his father had built on sand. Robert moved out of the house last month. He rents a small apartment downtown, close enough to see his daughters and Caleb frequently, but far enough that the wound doesn't bleed all over our furniture. Our divorce is finalized. I am legally Sarah Sullivan, a single mother of 2 plus 1. Caleb is still here. He's starting to talk more, to laugh with my children, to eat my messy food. He's a good kid, lost and grieving, and he has found a strange, difficult home with me. I realized that the greatest betrayal Robert committed was not leaving Janice or hiding Caleb. It was making me doubt my own judgment and sanity for 10 years. But in the end, that betrayal gave me a son I didn't know I needed. My safe, predictable life has gone, replaced with a messy, complicated, and legally precarious existence. But it is built on truth now. And when Caleb smiles at me, the ghost of the lie disappears, and I know that I saved the two most important things in my life: my integrity and the grieving child who desperately needed an anchor. He lost his father's love, but he gained a home built by the woman his father betrayed.